Brother K. June 6, 2017. I am Brother K. Sisters and brothers in humanity, let us settle down together, if you don't mind, and let us embrace each other. I honor and greet your presence. Silence. As many speakers have told you, you have entered the period of solving the equation of this world, if I may say so. Allow me first of all, in this period of revelation, to reveal to those of you who would not have recognized me, who I may well have been in my last incarnation among you. I was indeed Jula Krishnamurti. Long before that, I was the one who was named Jesus. Thus, as you may know if you know my story during my last life, I was recognized, if I may say so, very young, by some beings who saw, of course, beyond appearances, who I was. As you may also know, I very quickly gave up being part of any organization. Having had the chance to experience a terrible morning at a young age, the veils, not of memory but the veils that masked the truth to me, were removed on that occasion. Of course, in my last incarnation, I have always refused this heritage, not because I did not know it, but much more so as not to distort, if I may say so, this kind of veneration and adoration which was very embarrassing in relation to what I saw. So perhaps, if you had the opportunity to hear me or read me when I was incarnate, I always tried to get out of all possible conditioning and all possible known. Of course, what I realized was a preparation for what is there now and what has been happening on this earth since I left. So what I have to say to you will not be long, but I have been asked today to answer your questions about this very historical reality that has been so distorted by those who, precisely, created the organizations after my arrival. First of all, as you have been told many times now for exactly 3 months, you have been given the opportunity to live, to understand, to accept or to refuse, that the earth lives very exactly what has been told and announced to you since time immemorial. As you know, everything has been done on this earth to make you forget, not only who you are, but also all the bits of history that could give you a common thread and bring you back to the truth. So I come, for those of you for whom it is necessary today, to restore the truth of this incarnation that I was. What you have to live is indeed what has been illustrated by my death and resurrection, that is, the crucifixion. That is, to grasp, to live, to grasp the vanity of this world, and to believe or hope that the heavenly kingdoms had a place in the conditions of the earth's confinement. Of course, this is impossible, because the world is inner, and what you observe on the screen of your life is ultimately only the interaction of the personal and individual worlds, not depending on the ego, but on the presence of the spirit, and also on the soul until now. Thus, in a progressive way, forgetting appeared and was replaced by an organization where fortunately some brothers imitated me so much that they became me, not as Jesus but as Christ. This was, in the West, what you called the saints, who while being in some organizations, nevertheless managed to find their hearts and truth in these organizations. Of course, their message has also been relatively modified, so as not to allow each of you to be identified with Christ. This is where the notion of a savior outside you, a savior at all, who should come back at the end of time to save you, came into being. You know full well that this is not the case, and it is only you who can save yourself, if you still believe that there is anything to save. What is to be saved cannot be lost, it has always been there, it is the spirit of truth, it was simply occulted, suffocated by history that has been altered by the confinement of the world. And despite the sowing of the earth by the Christic matrix, during my death on the cross and my resurrection, it was extremely easy to deceive the whole of humanity and to mislead researchers through improbable scenarios and external stories that have nothing to do with the truth of what I could say. Of course, whether in the Gospels you know or in the apocryphal Gospels, there are many very real descriptions of what was lived at that time, but which are nevertheless disguised as to their purpose. Remember that the forces opposed to the light cannot create anything, they can only divert to their advantage any manifestation whatsoever within this world, the light or the truth, in order to distort perception, to cause what you now call cognitive dissonance, so that you can never find yourself. This is the case today in your modern world, no longer of religions but of what is called distractions. Many years ago, I already had the opportunity to evoke what the image represented by your screens is, which really is, as I said, a screen to the truth. The forces currently present on Earth are revealed in their entirety. No one will be able to hide what he is, no one will be able to escape the truth. I confirm this even today. It is therefore up to you, inside yourself and not by analyzing external facts, to find this falsity. Those of you who have lived, whether it is the vibratory processes that we have accompanied, or more recently what is happening with the new archangelical radiance or with theophanies, have led you, even if you cannot yet place words or explanations in them, to live this truth of the heart from within. By living the truth of the heart, you realize that no matter what stories appear to be told in this world, none of these stories allow you to find your heart. Whether it is by following the Buddha, by following Christ, by following someone, you are not yourself. To become Christ is not to follow Christ, it is really to disappear in order to leave room for the one who sacrificed himself for you, to give you the way, the truth, and the life. When I said that I was the way, the truth, and the life, it was never a question of creating a cult of my person, of my history, especially to represent myself in the suffering of the cross rather than to represent myself in glorious Christ. All these images have permeated you, whether you like it or not, for thousands of years, for 2,000 years. They have led you to errors of positioning, to distorted understandings that have never allowed you or will never allow you to find the essential truth, which is what happens in your intimacy and in no way in any history book, in any book telling and narrating events that occurred a very long time ago. Only the apocalypse known as of St. John was written under my dictation and is in conformity in every respect, whether in terms of the events you are currently living, whether in terms of the purely vibrational aspect, leading you, as explained during the revelation of the first Metatronic keys, to allow you to find, if I can say so, the thread that leads you to your eternity. Today things are different, because nothing must remain hidden, because the spirit of truth is there. I led many of you, despite their misunderstanding, during my last incarnation, to perhaps ask yourself more intense questions. As you may know, my listeners were captivated, even if they did not really understand the meaning of my words. The conditions, of course, are profoundly different today and my speeches as Krishnamurti prepared the ground, in the same way that the elders, in general, like the stars, also prepared the ground for your resurrection. It is now time to reveal the usurpations that have taken place. They are countless. They are still present today during certain spiritual teachings where some people call me by a name that has nothing to do with the truth. Remember that for forces opposed to the light, the name is what will be imprinted on you. If this name is coupled with stories, the stories, whether you accept them or not, are imprinted, not perhaps in you but in the collective functioning of humanity, and come to lock the being more and more in ignorance and in the inability to turn towards oneself. This is the case for the entertainment industry, this is the case for everything you see in any image. No image, no intellectualization, no understanding, can replace truth. Truth is a land without a path. As I said, there is nothing to go through but its internal territories. Everything you pick up on the outside, everything you understand on the outside, ultimately and in truth, are just obstacles in your path, hijackings that prevent you from seeing who you are. All this is over. As you know, since the liberation of the earth, the adamantine light has been spreading extensively at all levels of this earth. A threshold was crossed on March 8th, another threshold will be crossed tomorrow, precisely on June 7th, allowing a number of elements to be discovered through the beginning of the dissolution of the human societal organization, in its distorted aspects, in its lies, and in its transvestites. The only way to deal with this, as you know, is to get inside yourself, into your intimacy, and not to be diverted, attracted or disturbed by what is going to happen. The only safe conduct is your heart. It has always been and will remain so in these particular times, with a much more obvious acuity than what was the case, even for those of you who have lived through the vibratory processes of descent from the supramental. The beloved John, as you know, was the one you call yourself, who is now called Sri Aurobindo. This was my beloved scribe. During his last life, as Sri Aurobindo, he also prepared humanity for what he called the descent of the supramental, through his writings, through his life, even if there were, I would say, some small errors, but normal at that time when he lived in his last incarnation, by considering also, like most of the elders, a continuation of a world that has no place in being. But this error is not important. The important thing is to have announced the descent of the supramental and to have stipulated himself, at the time of his departure, that he would return when the supramental was on earth, within certain individuals, to accompany Christ's installation. This is exactly what happened. This is exactly what many of you have been experiencing since the celestial weddings or before, since the first descent of the Holy Spirit. It is therefore time to give back to Jesus what is Jesus, if you can call it that. It is time today to see all this, not on the world stage but in your heart, as you have been told so many times. No one, as of tomorrow, can say that he did not know, because you will see for yourself that the only solution, the only escape from the conditions of this world, is not in the change of any kind of this world, because any change you have seen in the last 2000 years only makes you progress towards the kingdom of the shadow. The reign of the shadow ended, although some still parading around, on the precise and specific date of May 13, 2017. It was the time interval that was given to the forces of the shadows to try to seduce and disguise the truth according to memorable and extremely ancient agreements that it is not desirable or even necessary today to know. However, the masquerade, the illusion, the imprisonment, the deviation of the light, the deviation of the spirit, all this is over. The light takes back its place, its true place in each of you. That you refuse it, that you live it, that you accept it does not change anything. Indeed, as you know, it no longer depends on you or us, but simply, remaining very vague, on what I would call a mechanism of light, or a celestial mechanism, if you prefer. Thus, therefore, the only possible truth in order to escape the meshes of stories and images is really and concretely to look inside you, not to analyze your character, not to know anything about any past, but to immerse yourself radically in the eternal present, in Hic and Nunc I believe, as Archangel Enel told you, because really and concretely, the only truth is there. It is in the moment when you disappear that the truth is discovered. Some of you, moreover, disappear, but have not discovered the truth, because the moment was not yet intense enough, if I can say so, to realize it, make it concrete, and manifest it. Things have changed profoundly, not as individuals but as a group. Thus, as soon as your gaze is turned inward, you will notice in the days and weeks to come a greater ease to remain in joy and peace, but also to notice certain inconveniences, certain sufferings, from the moment when having found the heart really and concretely, you emerged from it. You know, there is no question, and it has been repeated countless times, of guilt or paying anything, but simply of being true. You're the path, the truth and the life. We have repeated it enough times. I have repeated it enough in my last incarnation, as when I was Jesus of Nazareth. Many things have been disguised. I have been made to belong to certain orders. I have been given special virtues. Some have said that I am a prophet. Others have said that I am a crook. What does it matter? What is important is not my life. What is important is simply what I have made possible, by surrendering myself totally to Christ from the moment of my baptism in the Jordan River, and especially at the moment of my crucifixion. It was at that time that I sowed the earth with my own blood mixed with the light of Christ, the earth itself prefiguring and allowing what is happening today. No organization of this earth can be of any use to you, quite the contrary. Today, as I said already in my last incarnation, and as I have had the opportunity to speak to you countless times, you must recover autonomy and inner freedom, that is, not depend on concepts, not depend on ideas, not depend on your history, not depend on any history of this earth, simply recover the essence of your being, which is the essence of my being. It makes no difference whether you call me Jesus, you call me Christ, you call me Brother K. What I realize then, today you realize, each of you is called, as soon as you look inside, to become again what I was, to become again himself beyond any world, and in particular beyond this world. As I also said, no one can serve two masters at the same time. Either you serve this world or you serve eternity. By serving eternity, you serve the world much better than if you were simply trying to serve the world or serve your brothers and sisters, because at that moment you do not make a difference between the one you see, who is close to you, and the stranger who dies of hunger, disease or suffering on the other side of the planet. In this sense, when I was Jesus, I was able to say, "What you do to the least of you, you do to me." In the same way today, what you do to the least of you, you do to yourself. Everything is one, as you know, our Oriental brothers have perfectly explained it, perfectly lived it, free from any history, any tradition. Today it is the same for you. Whatever your initial state, from tomorrow onwards, whether you are released to life, whether you see asleep, whether you are awake, vibrating or not, you will see very quickly that all this will change abruptly and extremely quickly as human events intensify. It is therefore not something paradoxical but much more obvious to the one who acquiesces to the light. The hubbub of this world is only a reflection of its falsity. Thus, when the light illuminates, it gives birth to all the claims of those who want to alter it, those who want to lock it up, those who want to deceive it. This concerns you at the individual, collective and global level. This does not only concern, from tomorrow, human consciousness, but any consciousness in any dimension whatsoever, present in the Earth's environment. This concerns insects, flowers, plants, the peoples of nature, even those who are not directly involved in the process of liberation of the earth, but nevertheless everything that is conscious or unconscious at the level of this earth will live this salutary transformation, which is simply to turn one's gaze inward. Therefore needs, whatever they may be, realized with yourselves as realized with the sun, with the situation, with the spirit of the sun, with me, with Christ, are there to help you to cross alone the ultimate gate. There is no more adequate and perfect condition than in the hubbub of this world to realize the totality of your eternity, right here in incarnation. As has been said, many charisms are called to manifest themselves, but these charisms are only the witness of the truth. They must not, in any way, allow anything illusory to continue, otherwise, and this has also been said, you will feel perfectly and concretely the difference between the moments when you dwell in peace and happiness and the moments when you leave it. It will become really obvious, without difficulty, without effort, without questioning. This is where the ultimate reversal, the ultimate sacrifice and the true resurrection are to be found, and this for the time that we do not know, between the beginning of human tribulations and the arrival of the heavenly sign. Every passing day will see the hustle and bustle increased, and the peace increased in each of you who have turned your eyes inward. This is how you demonstrate to yourself your autonomy, your freedom, and the direct experience that you have nothing to do within the confinement. There are no steps to climb, there are no mountains to climb, there are no more important vibrations than those you have lived through, there is just the realization of who you are from the moment the last veils and the last personal and collective veils will fade away. Peace is within you, it will be less and less to be found, in its falseness, outside. This has been told to you, it is so simple and obvious, and yet many of you still have not understood what is to be understood and which can be understood in 2 words or 2 sentences. Look inside you. As you know, there is no continuity. In my last incarnation, when I was asked questions about the linearity of this world, the spiritualities of this world, I often replied that the person who asked me this question had not been on the other side of the shore to check. It is up to you to make the trip. Do not believe what your head tells you, do not believe what your perceptions tell you, nor do you believe what your vibrations tell you. Do not believe in any story either, because there is no story, there is only confinement on the surface of this world. That is why I said that my kingdom was not of this world, and that is why I was in frontal opposition with the guardians of the temple who were getting caught up and who had never understood or lived the slightest shred of interiority. This is what leads to the lack of interiority, to transvestism, to war, to conflict, to opposition, to murder, to war. The only true peace is within oneself, as many great beings have told you. I will not mention them, they are countless, and yet the whole of humanity has continued on the path of distraction, on the path of external spiritual search, of understanding this world rather than of living the eternity. This is so because it is the characteristic of what is called ego, it is so because there exists, as soon as you were born in this world, the fear of death that is inscribed in the intimacy of this body. Falsification, illusion and confinement have not only affected consciousness, of course, they have first and foremost affected the organization of your biological structure, so that this biological structure cannot respond to the influx of light. It is in this sense that the preparation was extremely long when the light returned at the end of this cycle, at the end of the zodiacal revolution, a long cycle that corresponds, as you know, to more than 50,000 years. Things have been profoundly different for 30 years, even if few incarnated human brothers and sisters have lived it, but over time, many elements have been realized that make it possible today to live this interiority from the moment you let go of everything that concerns the outside. There is no other way out, as we have always said, the only way out is the heart, the gift of self, the gift of life in this world to find eternity. As you know, everything you care about today holds you much more firmly than the history of this world, even if you have turned away from it. So I humbly ask you to look inside yourself, sincerely and objectively before you see anything about the state of the light, to look at yourself honestly and frankly. There is no punishment or fear to have, but simply to acknowledge, both to acknowledge mistakes and to acknowledge who you are. But until you acknowledge your mistakes, until you recognize something true in this world, you cannot recognize yourself. The time is no longer for procrastination, time is no longer for hesitation, because as we have told you, the times are fulfilled, the ascension of the earth has begun, your liberation has also begun, in a collective way. You know it, and Jean told you, there will be a certain number of shocks to deal with, but these shocks concern the outside and absolutely not your inner being, your being of eternity. It is in this way that it will become easier and more obvious to turn inside, because when you can no longer be distracted from the outside, when you can no longer be chained to your activities, even the most honest and logical ones in this world, then you are really and concretely available. Only the one who holds on to this exterior that disappears will suffer. The one who finds his heart will not be able to suffer. No hair on his head will be touched, because he will be in the truth, because he has understood that the truth does not need to protect itself, does not need to be distorted, does not need to be interpreted, nor even to be understood. It is to this inner revolution, this ultimate passage, that I have come today to invite you back. It was also decided, among all the elders, to provide some answers for those who still have questions about the life of Jesus or the life of Christ. Then my words will end there today, and I remain at your disposal to answer your questions, whether they concern, as I said, my so-called historical life or the mechanisms I have mentioned today concerning this last passage. Silence. Here too, do not hesitate, be frank and spontaneous, do not hold back anything, give free rein to the spirit, give free rein to what emerges as questions. Wherever they come from, in the spirit or in you, I will answer them. Question. Our physical body is destined to disappear, yours has been resurrected. So there is a difference between your body and ours. I would like to point out to you that you will all rise again except those who will really and concretely die, because they will have no reason to be in the scenario of a history of this world or a future world, or who need to perfect a certain number of vibratory elements, of codings, concerning the return to their original dimension or their eternity. So then the resurrection, you will leave it to. After 3 days of stasis, you will leave the tomb, with or without this body. He who lives the spirit, cannot in any way be subjected to any carbonaceous matter whatsoever. I am not talking about a third dimension, but I am talking about carbonaceous matter, in the sense that you understand it. Only some intergalactic brothers life and evolve within what you call the third unified dimension, because the rules of their world, the influence of the radiation of the source, is not at all the same as what it is on Earth. The question of the body of flesh that you ask only reflects the ignorance of the lived experience of what it is to live in eternity. Eternity does not need, as you know, any form or dimension, even if the game of consciousness allows you to freely experience all worlds, all experiences. It is part of your freedom as beings of love. If you ask this question, then I can tell you that you do not know the other side and that you are trying, in your head, to understand something to accept to live it. This is a typical example of what is called these false spiritualities that formally bind who you really are to this world, when there is no possible correlation, except, of course, except at the level of the soul turned towards matter and who does not know, who has not recognized the spirit. In any case, be aware that through this question the problem of the death of the ego arises. Whatever your age, you know full well that death is near, even if there was no collective end. The problem and the problematic is exactly the same in each of your incarnations, because each incarnation that has not allowed you to be true locks you even more into free will and the law of karma. If your conscience today has turned to this past and these past, at no time can you be free, no matter what your head tells you. You must literally and concretely drop any knowledge that is presented to you by your head. Only the heart, and when I speak of the heart, it is not a concept but the real and concrete perception of the happiness of what happens when you have arrived in your heart. The one who has arrived in his heart, really and concretely, does not care about the games of illusion. He has seen the truth, he has gone to the other side, he has returned, he can no longer be abused, whereas there, through your question, you're abused by your own mind which directs your consciousness and directs your life. It is time, my brother, to let go of all this nonsense, all this stupidity that takes you away from the beauty of your heart. So I beg you, I answer your question. What does it matter what happens to your body? Are you this body? Are you that ephemeral one who continues from life to life and suffers from life to life? Be honest and be true. What are you afraid of if not losing a form that is destined to perish anyway? There have been very few beings on earth who have been able to bring their bodies into the light, their bodies of flesh. This is not the purpose, but it corresponded to a precise objective. It was my case, it was the case of Mary, it was the case of Enoch, it was the case of Elijah. The very formulation of your question shows your visceral attachment to matter. There is no heart in it except the heart of the mind that makes you think of bladders as lanterns. Understand well that I am not accusing you, that I am not recriminating you, but that I am helping you to see the truth. As long as you are interested in the past, as long as you are interested in your body and its future, it makes sense to take care of your body to keep it functioning properly. It makes no sense to connect this body to spirituality in any way. The major problem is the stories that have been engrammed in you as you have lived your lives, and more particularly in this end time period, as I have had the opportunity to say, through the images, the seduction of your eyes, the seduction of your senses, the seduction of believing you immortal within your character, through reincarnation. So now I tell you, it's time to stop all this wandering, it's time to go inside you and see you beyond any game. Until this is done, you will wander from question to question, and gradually from fear to fear, from suffering to suffering. Is that what you want, or is that the true light? From tomorrow, none of you will be able to say that you did not know, even if you did not hear our words, even if you were never interested in anything other than your material life. Do you realize, in any case in the West, that you are still countless to be convinced that death is the end, that there is nothing else after it? Isn't that the worst thing you've forgotten? Isn't that the root cause of your suffering? So of course, as soon as you discover spirituality, you will explore a certain number of events, then you will be interested in your childhood, then you will seek in your past justifications to your present. These justifications to your present are only variables that can never allow you to live what you are. Accept this and check it in yourself. I'm not asking you to believe me, I'm asking you to experience it. To ask oneself the question of the death of this body is a denial of the spirit. Accept it, there is no judgment or condemnation, there is simply pure truth. We cannot speak of this truth as long as somewhere you are identified with your person, your body, your character, and this will be seen very quickly for each of you. No one can say that he didn't know. That is to say, from tomorrow, the sentence I used during my crucifixion will no longer have any reason to be, because none of you will be able to ask for what you did not want to see. You'll have to go through the narrow gate in order to find what you are, and to put an end to all your illusions through love and in love, not that of your person, not the love of this world, not the love of the past or the future, but the love of the true life. You're the path, the truth and the life in the present instant, and nowhere else. Silence. If I have suggested that you answer your questions about the life of Jesus, it is not to strengthen history but to allow you, if there are still questions about it, not to be fooled by certain writings, by certain conditionings present within what is called the external church, which more than ever is not my church. My church is inside you, that's what I said at the temple. Destroy this temple, my body, and I will rebuild it in 3 days. This is exactly what you will live, enriched by Mary's call. And look how this has been understood. You were told about the resurrection of the dead, but it is a resurrection of life and not of what is dead and who dies anyway. You see how reversing, falsifying, with words, with writings, is extremely easy. You are not responsible for this. What is responsible for it is your brain structure itself on which your consciousness is printed. There can therefore be no solution of freedom within this confinement. Silence. Do you have any further questions? Question. A friend has been living a year of transubstantiation. She says she's dead but is still alive. It seems her body is regenerating. What will happen if we all have to leave our bodies? But the regeneration of some of your loved ones, which you observe in some brothers and sisters, is linked to the acceptance of the light, to nothing else. If there is acceptance of the light and the light commands in this body, it also means that the brain structures have changed, and it seems to me that we have taught you the correspondence between the 12 stars, the spiritual functions that are located at the head level and therefore act on the brain. So the transubstantiation, before the stasis, you notice it, either you are suffering, or you notice the appearance of diseases, or you're regenerated in this body. And it is visible, and it is lived, it is felt. It's the effect of the light, so the what's the point? Has nothing to do with it. It is precisely the consciousness of eternity that unfolds, which regenerates this body that will disappear. When the threshold of light is reached, at the moment of what the commander has called the final planet grill, the carbonaceous matter will disappear, there will be no trace left of it. So it is quite normal, since the purpose is common, that some of you who have already recognized the truth of the light, and embracing it and living it in peace, happiness and joy, see their bodies transformed, rejuvenated and functioning with lightness. There is liberty, there is the true food of the bodies, wherever they are located in the dimensions. I remind you that even some of our brothers from Gaia, who I named the angels of the Lord, have a biological body, but they do not need to eat, they do not need to reproduce, and yet it is a biological body. You are so conditioned that you are convinced that whatever the third dimension, I am sure, you are convinced that you must eat, that you must make love, that you must have a home. But all this is conditioning of the enclosed matter and not of the free matter. That's why you have to get used to it, get rid of everything that's known. You have no support and no reference point in any story or experience, only the heart makes you discover the truth. Everything else is just embezzlement, without exception. What you have called saints or mystics, whether in the Catholic Church or elsewhere in the world, are in fact beings who have discovered their hearts. So of course, cultural influence will play a role in translating this, according to origin, according to culture, according to education, but they are only colorings, a clothing that avoids the confusing aspect of this light for the one who is locked up and locked in his ego. Silence. The light, when it is received in the heart in its entirety, by the consciousness, is capable of regenerating any body, as you know. Some bodies of some saints who are in fact only those who have been clothed in Christ, as I was 2000 years ago, prove by their incorruptibility of the flesh, holiness. The impact of the light in the heart has been such that the matter cannot dissolve. It will, of course, be dissolved, this matter, at the moment of the final planet grill. If you're angry, if you don't believe it, then I can assure you that you have never met your heart, and there is no point in believing it, you have to live it. Silence. The structure of your brain forces you to adhere to concepts, ideas, thoughts, but who thinks, who has ideas, who has concepts? Where do these ideas come from? Where do these thoughts come from? Where do these concepts come from? It was one of the first questions I asked myself before recognized myself. Rediscovering you puts you in a joy and peace that no achievement in this world can bring you, even in the most joyful events. Because it is not comparable, it is not measurable. Silence. Do you have any other questions? Question. Was Jesus married? Yes, I was married and had 3 children. There is nothing worse for a Westerner than to be alone. However, among our Oriental brothers, this is not a problem, because the brain structure is not the same. It is in this respect that the heresy of the Church, having prohibited marriage, is a monumental error. I would also remind you that within orthodoxy, which is much closer to my heart, which in any case was, marriage was strongly recommended, because there is no other way to balance, on the outside screen, than to be with the opposite sex. But of course, as you know, human relationships have been so distorted, so altered, that today, and you see it, most couples separate very quickly, more and more quickly, because they seek in the other what they cannot find. So yes, Marie Magdalene was my wife, legal and official, all this was of course withdrawn. So yes, I had 3 children who came to this land in France, as well as my wife, while my mother went to the other side of the Mediterranean, accompanied by my beloved Jean. Mary had perfectly understood this sentence that I told her before giving her the last breath. Mother, behold your son. John, this is your mother. Silence. Any other questions among you? Question. What happened to your children? Who are they? They have procreated and multiplied. Some of them were known to you, they were the first kings of France. Their royalty was known and recognized. Some names have therefore appeared on the European continent, but this still belongs to history. Today this offers very little interest. It is in this sense, moreover, that France has been named the eldest daughter of the Church. It is in this sense that today this country has become the kingdom of the Antichrist. It is in this sense that it will have to be put down in the eyes of the world. This is not a battle, since my witnesses have no intention of fighting anything, but simply to prove, through their resurrection, the primacy of the heart over any earthly experience. Silence. Question. What was the real role of Judas? That was the role you know. Being clothed with Christ in my heart, I obviously saw beyond all appearance, and what the church judged, in telling this story, is indeed the truth, but the look and the point of view I had of it was the one who had to do the will of the source. That is why I am still telling you today not to judge, even the one who is your worst enemy. That is what it looks like. The only unique truth, if you do not see it yet, and when you do, you will be comforted by it, is that absolutely everything that is happening now, despite the vicissitudes, despite the songs of glory of the forces opposed to the light, the heart, and nothing else, that is, everything, without limiting anything, without excluding anything. Judas played his part perfectly. My goal was not to establish a kingdom on earth, which is impossible, because any kingdom established on earth belongs to Satan and is not mine. In my last incarnation, I was very gentle and very calm, as I have been with you for many years, but before the intensity of the light today, this sweetness no longer has any reason to be, because the truth is strong. It does not suffer any compromise from now on because everything is revealed. True sweetness is in your heart, it cannot be in the words that touch your person, because what I touch today is, as you may have lived since the Thephanies, it is the heart. And in the heart, there can be no lies, no alterations, no concepts, no stories. Moreover, look at what has always happened on this earth, with greater acuity during the last century, the so-called world wars, the interaction of countries, communications, all this shows you only competition and war. Where is life? Where is the truth? She is absent from all these games. Besides, look, with all that is done as violence in the name of God, I don't think there is much work left for Satan. God takes care of it very well in his name. Look at the killings, look at the wars, linked to greed, linked simply to the concepts of people who live nothing. Otherwise, if you live the heart, no matter what your religion, you cannot take any life, you cannot hurt anyone, you cannot go against life. Look at what religions have done, wherever they are. Silence. Question. When you said, "Father, I commend my spirit into your hands and Father, your will be done," are these sentences words of abandonment? I didn't understand what's being asked. The sentences I said are accurate, as you said them again. And so? Question. Is there an ultimate degree of abandonment between these two sentences? They are concomitant and correspond to the same stated truth. I'm not sure understood what you want to ask either. Question. I often repeat these sentences. Is there one of them that has a higher intensity of abandonment than the other? My dear sister, you can repeat this sentence all your life that it will not change one bit what you are, as long as you are not in your heart. You must first be in the heart before you can make sentences that have meaning for the person who lived it, but that have no meaning and have no effect until you are in the heart. You can repeat all the prayers you want, you can spend it, and some of you have done it, whole lives repeating the same prayers, and the heart stays dry. The heart is peace, the heart is joy, the heart is truth, and does not need words. And moreover, most often, when you repeat these sentences with heart, with certainty, but your actions are the opposite, where is the reality of your abandonment? Where is the disappearance of your character, your person, your story? You bring back this sentence of truth from the one who is on the cross and who lives the real abandonment by the crucifixion to your own character, to your own scenario. It's a travesty. You can repeat anything you want externally, it won't change an inch in the consciousness location. The heart is evidence, it never asks questions, it follows the evidence of the light, it accepts everything, it endures everything. When you speak the language, that of men and that of angels, if you lack love, you gain nothing. When you have all the powers, if you lack love, all this is false, you lack the essential at that moment. When I say you, I am not speaking to you but to each of you. Seek the kingdom of heaven that is within you and all the rest will be given to you as well, but do not do the opposite, without it you will never find the heart. And don't interpret what I say in relation to the heart. To have a good heart is not to be in the heart. Silence. Question. The Gemma Galgani star offered me the opportunity to live the Christic union. Did this happen? Who knows that better than you? Why wait for external confirmation? Realize. As soon as this question emerges, it means that it is not realized. Who asks the question, that kind of question, if not the mind? The heart is evident, I repeat, there can be no doubt, no question, no interrogation, no questioning. From the moment you speak to the outside, even in an authorized voice, even in a voice from the dwellings of eternity, it sends you back to yourself. The lived experience of the real heart cannot leave any doubt, cannot allow any question to emerge. Which means, on the other hand, that as soon as a question comes up about this, it means that it hasn't happened. It is in this sense that I repeat to you, only you can know it, no matter what I see and no matter what I say. If I answer you no, you will be frustrated. If I answer you yes, you will be satisfied, but it is not the answer that must satisfy you, it is your conscience itself, not your mind. But are you in bliss? Do you observe this bliss from your first awakening in the morning until your last glance at the outside before falling asleep? If the answer is yes, then you are in the heart, not in the mind, but you are the heart, otherwise it is up to you to conclude the truth. Once again, living eternity and being liberated alive leaves no room for any questions about the spirit. Of course, there will always be questions about the course of his or her life, the choices to be made, the decisions to be taken, but in no case can this concern a spirit. I invite you all to reconsider the truth. There is no point in lying to yourself or questioning the outside. The one who lives the heart cannot have any doubt or fluctuation in his presentation, his mood, his smile, whatever the life presents to him. Spiritual questioning about the spirit, can only come from the ego. The spirit is evident when it is revealed and lived, there can be no doubt about the spirit. On the other hand, there may always be hesitations and doubts about the choices to be made in his most ordinary life, about what you want to eat, about where you want to go on holiday, but why involve the spirit in this? The spirit gives you this peace and serenity. This happiness is love. Love and do as you please, but don't do as you please if you don't like it. Silence. Question. Why your sacrifice on the cross in the face of the world at 33 years of age? What was the real message and purpose? But I said it. To sow the earth with my blood, with the new matrix of life which I believe has been named the Christic matrix. Everything else served only the interest of the image, and therefore of illusion, and to organize our religion, and to make you believe that I would come to save you. Save you from what? Of yourselves. What is there to save? Be logical. Who thinks they need to be saved? You who are eternity. Be aware of the ineptitude of this kind of belief conveyed by this religion, as well as older or more recent religions that are only there to enslave you, except for certain brothers and sisters who have been sufficiently enlightened from within and who, despite the falsification, have managed to imitate me, to become me, not as Jesus but as the Christ of the time. Be empty of any concept. Please forget everything your head tells you. This does not mean that you should not ask me, but really see the source of your questions. The heart has no questions, the heart is evident and evidence. As has been told to you, it is felicity, beatitude, ecstasy. What else can there be that you need when you are going through this? Look at our star sisters, whether they are from the east or the west, whether they've lived on earth for a long time or left very early, look at their path, their testimonies. What more can there be need for an ecstasy? The one who is the heart, whether star, elder or unknown today, because you were countless, does not need to refer to any past, because he has discovered the treasure, and the treasure puts an end to all lack. I can only invite you today, on the eve of June 7th, to meet again beyond any concept. Everything that has been lived, even in your mystical experiences, even in your vibrations, keep only the theophany, keep only what a friend and Master Ram has given you. Look at the advice you recently received from Teresa de Lisieux. The ego will always do everything in its power to prevent you from living the heart. Whatever you say and whatever you think, this is the inversion that makes you believe that the more knowledge you have, the more experiences you have, the closer you get. They are crutches, but at some point, you have to let go of these crutches, otherwise these crutches will not move you forward. They permanently block the door of your heart until you reject them. Remember that the ego and the person are always underpinned by fear. The ego believes itself immortal, it tells itself stories, it tells you stories. Enclosure has made you heavier, has gradually, during this cycle, made you descend ever deeper into the depths of darkness and not into the depths of the heart. Moreover, our Oriental brothers call it the Black Age, the Dark Age, the Kala Yuga. How can there be any truth in this? Because everything is disguised, the very organization of society is disguised. Where is the sharing? Where is the truth? Look what you did with the money. Is there any freedom in what you call society? Is there any space of freedom in this world, since you are limited by this body, limited by birth and death? Is what is happening true? Eternity never passes, it has always been there. Accept the mistakes, accept your wanderings, forgive yourself, and, above all, as I said, go and sin no more. There is no sin except against the spirit, there is no mortal sin, they are fables that the men of the church have created from scratch. Silence. Question. Concerning the words that have been written. If this cup can pass away from me without me drinking it, if not, your will be done. I repeated this sentence in the Garden of Gethsemane 3 times. It is indeed true, because every human being, even a living liberated one, knows that he is not this body, but there is, as I told you, a biological structure that aims to preserve the body. It is this biological structure in your brain that makes you believe that you are an identity, a person and a story, and, of course, I have not escaped the rule. At the moment of your last breath, you'll have an advantage over me, enormous. Mary will have come to tell you. Mary was at the foot of the cross, suffering as a human mother. I'm also surprised that none of you are asking me the question of the Immaculate Conception. These are also fables. Mary was indeed a virgin, but it was not the Holy Spirit who got her pregnant. It took genetic material that is absolutely not Joseph's genetic material, but is indeed an intervention of the light, as Archangel Gabriel stated. I was not born from nothing, only the source can do it, you know it, he has expressed it to you, he can make any body appear, but I was born of the flesh and the spirit. Mary's sewing was done by a technique that you would call artificial insemination today, with peoples who have nothing to do with humanity. It was necessary to bring, because of my biological structure as Jesus, even before Christ came to break, and this from the moment of conception through the genetic material, the principle of confinement present in the brain. So we needed an external blood. When I say blood, you understood me. It is genetic material outside the earth and yet human, but human that is not from the earth. Silence. So you see, my mother pregnant by the operation of the Holy Spirit is a monumental law. It was necessary that the biological structure in which I arrived could support. It is indeed the Word, the presence of Christ. You have seen for yourself, for some of you, the steps that have had to be taken for those of you who opened up, if I may say so, decades ago. So to imagine that in 3 years a biological structure can support Christ in the midst of confinement is simply impossible. Silence. I know very well that many of you, by reading or listening to these words, will enter into a refusal or denial. What does it matter? Tomorrow is the truth of the heart. Silence. I think it's going to be time for me now to leave. Allow me then to offer you the blessing of Jesus Christ, a theophany, not only with Brother K, not only with Jesus, and beyond history itself, a theophany with Christ. Dear sisters and brothers in humanity, it has been an important moment to reveal these few elements to you. Then, in the name of truth, you are blessed. Silence. I am Brother K. Silence. In love, I greet you. In eternity, I give you thanks. Silence. Goodbye. I address to each of you the kiss of fire, the kiss of love. Silence. I'll leave you now. Through Jean-Luc AYOUN Transformations English Translation, LMF.